Hello guys, how are you? Hope you're all well. So welcome to another little wine tasting chat. I hope you all enjoyed the Sauvignon Blanc tasting a couple of weeks ago. It was good fun. A lot of you joined in on the Saturday night. Got a couple of bottles of wine from us, or I guess some of you got your own. But from the comments, it sounds like a lot of people joined in. We know we dropped off quite a few bottles of Sancerre to you guys, and yeah, it was good fun, good feedback. And after the Malbec one we did prior to that as well, I think there's some fun to be had with this. It's not quite the same as being in the bar with you all on a lovely sunny evening like today or something. You know, it's as close as we can get for now. What with Boris saying that you know, this industry is going to be last to open, I think we're going to have to take what we can get right now and have fun how we can. And for me, you know, this is something I love doing anyway. I love chatting about wine. I don't like drinking it on my own. Not many people do. And those that do often go and see my wife as a doctor. So yeah, definitely scared away from doing that after talking to my wife. She wouldn't let me do it anyway. She's far too sociable. So after the fun we've had though, with with Sauvignon, this week we're going to talk about Chenin Blanc. I don't know if many of you have had it in our bar or if it's a wine you guys drink very often. In the bar, I know that not often you guys ask for it, but I do know it's very popular. You see it in every supermarket you go to. It's on most wine lists. We do have one or two in the bar. There's one that's very popular with you guys. We'll talk about that in a moment. Chenin Blanc as a grape though is a real fascinating one because of its various guises around the world, different to Sauvignon in the terroir side of things, but again we'll get onto that. So the grape was originally found, I think, in the 800s, so the 9th century, near Anjou, near the city of Angers, western France. I think it was called, what do they call it? Plant d'Anjou or something like that. And it was picked up there around the 800s, made its way up to a town called Chenin, which, if you remember the Sauvignon chat we mentioned, Chenin makes great rival or bedfellow to Sancerre, made in the same region, same grape. So Chenin Blanc made its way up there, very close by to the city of Sancerre, the town of Sancerre, and it found its way to a chap who was planting vines. He was a member of the aristocracy, was his name, is something crazy. He was the lord of Chateau Chenin, and this was probably in the 1400s this happened. This chap, this lord of the Chateau Chenin, he got some of these vineyards, these vines. He was planting a new vineyard of various different things. Got hold of the Plant d'Anjou. He planted it. And nearby to where he was growing these vines was a place called Mont Chenin. The grape took on the name Mont Chenin, and from there developed into Chenin Blanc as we now know it. I think that's kind of roughly what happened. You historians out there can go and check up on it for me. But from what I understand, this is what ampelographers thinks happened. An ampelographer is probably what a lot of us would love to be. It's a botanist who specialises in categorising in the history of vineyards, grapes, vines. Sounds like a really cool job actually, doesn't it? I wish I'd done that. Oh, God. Anyway, moving back onto Chenin. The grape, as you might well know it, made its way over to South Africa not long after this period. It's a very vigorous grape, grew well in France, the Loire Valley, and as the empires began to expand from the old world out to the new world, the Dutch East India Company sent some cuttings over in the 1600s to a chap, I always forget this guy's name, it's Jan van, it's like Beek or something, Jan van Riebeek, I think his name was, over in South Africa, in the Cape Good Hope region. They sent him some cuttings. He planted them. Stuff took off. Went crazy. Now, the good thing about the grape and the vine itself is that it's vigorous and it's quite a rampant vine. It grows very easily. It handles all sorts of conditions well. So when it was planted out there, it kind of amalgamated itself into the soil, into the climate out there, grew really well. And one of the problems with that though is vines like that grow well, they produce a lot of fruit. Now you might think that's brilliant, awesome, you know, you're getting bang for your buck there, you're planting a vine, tons of fruit, tons of wine, make a load of cash, happy days, everyone's drunk, everyone's rich, it's a utopia. Unfortunately, vines don't work like that, typically. So in South Africa where they planted it, what they found was it really was growing out of hand, and the same thing happens in the wine, they have to manage this. So there's a kind of an equation, I guess, in the wine industry for growing whereby the more fruit a vine produces, typically the lower quality that fruit will be, and thus the lower quality of the wine that you make from that fruit will be. An example would be in California, where they grow in the hot central valleys there, they grow, or used to grow in the 80s, a lot of Chenin Blanc. They were producing this stuff off the hook, you know, they were growing it to maximum yields on these vines. What that produces is a very bland version of the Chenin Blanc grape. It loses its character and gets diluted, if you like, on the vine, because the vine's trying to power all these grapes and based on limited nutrients it can bring up. So the grapes tend to be a weaker version of what they could be. So what they need to do in South Africa, and I know they do this all over the place, but in South Africa with this vine, what they have to do is various different techniques to control the growth of the Chenin Blanc grape. One of them would be green harvest, it's called. So during the growing season, they'll go around to the vineyards and they'll take off big bunches of the immature grapes off all over the place off the vines, cut them away. Now, depending on what period of the season it is, they'll either be wasted or they can use them for younger, slightly different styles of wines or blending or something like that. But the goal here really is to leave the higher quality fruit on the vines, which then has more concentrated nutrients from the vines, which isn't being distributed among so many grapes, if you like, right? Another thing they often do is they graft rootstock of slower growing vines onto the underlying roots of the Chenin Blanc vine, which is a really quite a cool thing actually. So they'll get the underground part of the roots of the Chenin Blanc vine, they'll get the underground parts of another vine. So for example, there's a vine called the Frost grape, there's another one called the Riverbank grape, and these are indigenous wild vines, trailers, that grow or are found all over North America, I think, for example, or South America. And what they've done with these, they've found that they can graft just the underground growing section, not the buds, just the underground growing root section of these slow growing vines onto the upper parts, the budding parts, if you like, of the Chenin Blanc. They graft them, put it back in the ground, and hey presto, you've got this hybrid whereby the grapes that produce the Chenin Blanc, the vine Chenin Blanc, but underneath the ground, that system under the ground takes on the behavioural characteristics of a slower growing vine, which means that it slows down the production, the rate of vigorous growth, and that therefore leads to easier management of the vine and hopefully a lower yields, which in turn gives us a high quality. So in South Africa, they quickly found that the stuff took off. You know, in France they'd had it for hundreds of years already, and they understood this. South Africa, they had to learn that. The grape found its way over to Australia in the 1800s. There's a couple of different people that may or may not have grown it first, but it seems to around the 1850s, 1860s, it was being grown and cultivated out there. Unfortunately for me, I don't love the Australian stuff. Anyway, we'll talk about that later. So the amount of Chenin actually planted in South Africa now versus the Loire is quite interesting. So the Loire Valley is considered the base and the home of this grape, the Chenin Blanc, similar to the Sauvignon grape, right? Now at this point, roughly, I think about 15% of the vines grown in Loire Valley are Chenin Blanc, which is the highest single varietal grown in the Loire Valley. So you could very much say Loire Valley is the home of this grape still in France. You would have thought that, you know, France would be the biggest region for growing the grape, seeing as it's the home of it. But no, South Africa really found a new love of the grape, and it's found a new home there in a way. And I think they are currently doing about double the amount of grape growth out there for Chenin Blanc that France does, that the Loire Valley does. And similarly, that reflects onto the amount of Chenin Blanc they sell. So South Africa sells about 53% of the world's output of Chenin Blanc, as opposed to roughly half of that for France. I think after that you've got, after France, I think comes, I'm trying to think, is it the USA maybe, in growth distribution and of Chenin Blanc after that. So the grape found its way around the world anyway, and it's now grown most in South Africa, though you will find it all over the world. So I'm just trying to think. I know that in America it's grown in California, so you've got it in Napa, you've got it in Clarksburg. We've actually got a Clarksburg one, we'll talk about that later as well. Columbia Valley, I think even down in Texas they grow the stuff. Not in huge quantities, but it's growing up there. We're getting it in Chile, obviously in Australia, we talked about that earlier on, so you've got it in WA, you've got it in Victoria, New South Wales actually as well. You're getting it in Brazil even, I think, grow it. I know Uruguay grow it, so you know, it's New Zealand got it, it's everywhere. But in terms of the ubiquitousness of it, I haven't even drunk anything yet. It's really South Africa that's taken the crown. And why did the grape find a home out there? So, well, I suppose there's various reasons why. Maybe we can talk about that. It's been said that it's due to a few things. The grape's very hardy, as I said. The vines are long-lived, so they've got good longevity. And they have very good resistance to various conditions. So, you know, in South Africa, the climate can be very hot, can be very dry, can be very windy. It can be wet. You can have fluctuations in temperature, and the vines are not so sensitive that kills them off. You know, there's a lot of vines out there that are far too sensitive for such changing conditions, would require far more protection. South Africa, it's got sometimes Mediterranean conditions, it's sometimes got much cooler conditions. So it's found a home there purely because it's such a kind of a vigorous vine, I suppose. So moving on to what it actually tastes like, this stuff. Now, this is quite an interesting one. You know, if you've had our Vouvray from the Loire Valley, you will know it's quite floral. It's got quince and apple notes going on, green apple, quince. Some honeysuckle on the nose sometimes, you know. It's very crisp, got high acid in it, typically, from the Loire Valley. And that's in part the terroir, and it's also in part the fact that they do control the growth so strictly so that the fruit is concentrated on the vine. The acidity is lost if you overgrow that vine. If you let too much yield happen, that acidity drops. You're getting a flabby, kind of tasteless grape, which, as I said earlier on, California was noted for. Not so much anymore. It's usually sold as a white wine, just as a still white wine. So those flavours are quite typical of the Loire Valley. Then you're going to get your apples, you're going to get your honeysuckle, you're going to get nice quincy flavours sometimes. Now, if the grape is grown and harvested quite young, due to the prevailing conditions that year, that season, then often those grapes are used to go into sparkling wines in the Loire Valley, so Cremant de Loire, for example. And that's quite different to the still stuff, in as much as the flavours are a bit more toasty, it's got a bit of peach, a bit of pineapple going on in it. It's a nice alternative to champagne, and we have that in the bar. You guys might well have had it. If the climate allows the grape to grow and stay on the vine longer, as in some parts of Vouvray and some seasons in Vouvray, then what happens is the grape gets sweeter. Sometimes that grape can develop noble rot or botrytis, and that's a good thing, because that means that the sweetness is really accentuated and it brings out the most amazing kind of barley sugar notes. You're gonna get real concentrated kind of sweet honey characteristics going on there, almost viscous style. Whereas if we move on to the New World, what we're going to find, so with Sauvignon we talked a lot about how the terroir affects the flavour of the wine and the style of the wine. Now typically they say that, if I can kind of paraphrase what's her name, Jancis Robinson, she says it's a bit of a Jekyll and Hyde of a grape. She says that the terroir in the New World, so the terroir, just to recap quickly, is your soil, your climate, your weather, that kind of thing. All right, all affects the flavour or the style of a wine. In the case of such a grape like Sauvignon, in this case, Jancis Robinson says that actually in the New World, the terroir doesn't seem to make that much difference, or it's not expressed in the grape very often in what we're sold. In France it is, in the Loire Valley it is, and that is the one place where you find the grape expressing true world-class qualities and world-class prices as well. In the New World, they tend to go for a different style, and that style is often associated with really how they produce the wine, the vinification, as opposed to working with the terroir. What they do is they maintain a high acid in the grape, right? So they want to keep that acidity. So that comes down to, as I said, the kind of doing their green harvests and their root stock grafting and stuff to keep the yield as low as they can. So that keeps your acidity in the grape, and they want to keep that. That's a characteristic of the grape. But then from there, they change the way they develop the wine. So in the Old World, the most notable difference between these two methods, Old World, New World, is that in the Old World, they like to mature the wine at a higher temperature in their still vats. So they often work at about 60 to 68 degrees, say in France, right? They'll mature the wine at that temperature. In the New World, they like to drop it down 50, 54 degrees, something like that. What does that do? It brings out different flavours in the grapes. So cooler fermentation will develop tropical notes to your Chenin Blanc. You're going to get your pineapples in there, you're going to get a bit of mango going on there. If you do it at a higher temperature, which I guess is more of a natural temperature for the grape perhaps, it maintains the natural flavours of the grape. So often people that talk about Chenin Blanc from France would say it's got a green gauge character to it, quince, and that they are maintained at the 60, kind of 68 degrees range. In the 50s, it develops these tropical fruit notes, maintains its high acidity, and they love that style in the New World. And then in addition, in the New World, they'll sometimes pop the wine into some new oak to give it that toasty vanilla notes, a little bit of spice. And I know that was certainly something you might have found in the California wines, if you've tried them from there in the past. I don't know about these days so much, but we'll explore that next week maybe, or certainly the tasting on Saturday if we're lucky. I can see what I can get my hands on. So in terms of the tasting, what we're going to do, well, I want to compare these two characters, right? So we've talked a little bit here about your French style, your typical classic French style, which is, for me, a Vouvray. As I said, you guys have tried our Vouvray perhaps in the bar. If you've not, here she is. The sunshine makes it really hard to read, doesn't it? So this is our one from the bar. This is our classic kind of a take on the French Loire Valley style. We're going to compare that with, of course, South African. We have to. After all this chat, we couldn't do something else. It'd be a crime. We're going to compare it with something from the, where's it from? It's the Western Cape. It's Breed River Valley. Breed River Valley. It's in a mountainous region. It's not too far away from the Paarl region. So if you drink your South African wines, you will know that region. It's pretty close to there. We're going to compare those two styles, right? So we're going to have a nice South African, a nice Loire Valley, and we will see what difference those vinification techniques make and see which one we prefer. So if you want to join me in tasting the bottles I've got, you can of course do that. You drop me an email on iwantlejupe@gmail.com as usual, and I will make sure you get your 2 bottles, your South African and your Loire Valley, in time for Saturday. We'll do the tasting again about 6 o'clock on Saturday. If you want to get your own, that's absolutely fine. Pop down the supermarket, or if you've got them in your cellar, good for you. You can get yourself a Vouvray, please. Get yourself a demi-sec Vouvray. There's a lot of different types out there. They go from sec through to Malou, to sweet, almost viscous dessert wines actually. So you need to make sure you get demi-sec, same as me. And then the South African, if you can get something from the Breed Kloof region or the Breed River region, that'd be great. If it's Paarl, okay, it's close enough, we'll get away with that, all right? So about 6 o'clock, we'll give that a little go. Hopefully the weather will still be good, and maybe you could get the barbecue on, and I'll pop around for a sausage or a hamburger, as long as it's vegan. Yeah, I know, it sucks. All right, guys, look, have a great night, great week, and hopefully see you Saturday. Cheers.